everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Stand Up for Africa podcast with Edelman Africa. I'm Andrei, situated here in the Johannesburg office, and today we are joined by an esteemed panel of guests to announce and introduce the launch of the Edelman Regional Advisory. I'm not going to say very much about it because I'm not the expert. The folks on the line are the expert, and they will be the ones to speak a bit more, but I'll just introduce each one of them in turn. Beginning with Karena Crerar, who is my boss. How are you, Karena?
I'm good, thank you. I wish you wouldn't introduce me like that, but I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Well, we can always cut it out. I'm great. I'm very excited about having this conversation. So Karena, as mentioned, she is the CEO of Edelman Africa and is the lead of the Regional Advisory. She brings extensive experience across corporate and agency communication. She also leads strategic reputation programs across sectors and markets and is known for driving impact through leadership, visibility, and resilience. Does that sound familiar?
all too often, Andrei.
Oh gosh, okay, cool. And then I'm going to do ladies first, and we'll jump onto the guys afterwards. And then we're also joined by Geraldine. How's it, Geraldine?
I'm fantastic. How are you, Andrei?
I am awesome. She is joining also from South Africa. She is the advisor for Southern Africa, and she's also the business development director here in the Johannesburg office. She is an expert in business development and client relations. She also has a global track record with strong African insight and drives impact where brand, business, and reputation meet. We've also got Corey on the line all the way from Nairobi. Very excited to have you on the line as well, Corey. Corey is the managing director of Edelman Africa in East Africa, as well as the regional advisory lead for East Africa. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. Happy to be here.
I'm glad to have you too. She leads business growth and senior client counsel across East Africa and brings proven expertise across corporate and agency communications and is recognized for award-winning campaigns and strategic leadership. And then last but not least, we've got our two gentlemen on the line. We've got Kamal Taibi and Kwame Senou. We'll start with Kamal. Kamal is the founder and CEO of Stratius Group. He also is the regional advisor for North Africa. He brings deep expertise in public affairs, corporate and strategic communications. He's also a trusted advisor to global and regional players in sectors such as energy, finance, telecoms, technology, health, and more, and is also the founder of VitaVox Institute and a board member of both APRA and PRC MENA, championing impactful communication. Quite the resume you've got there, Kamal.
Thank you. You're saying it very well. I need to copy that lines from you.
I'll send you an invoice, and then we can talk.
Or I can record you and play it to my clients.
Oh, perfect. And then last, we've got Kwame Senou, who's the executive director of the Holding Opinion and Public, also known as STOP, who represents West and Central Africa on the Edelman Regional Advisory. He brings experience across journalism, strategic communications, and advisory, advertising and PR. He is skilled in audience research, segmentation, and strategy across digital and offline channels, and is also a trusted voice in Francophone West and Central Africa with impact across government, business, and NGOs. Bonjour, Kwame.
Bonjour, Andrei.
That's good to have you too. So, as mentioned, we are here to discuss the launch of the Edelman Regional Advisory. I am not going to be the one to tell you all about it, except to say that it is, really a way of us unlocking the power of Edelman on the African continent. And without any further, I am going to just throw the first question out to Karena. Please set the stage for us. Just give us a bit of an explanation about the relevance of why we are here and why now when it comes to the Edelman Regional Advisory.
Thanks, Andrei. Well, it's such a pleasure to have this group together. I couldn't imagine a more esteemed group to be talking together with today. Let me start with why now. I think really we are at a pivotal moment in Africa at the moment. So when we think about global institutions, so whether it's governments, development agencies, multinational corporations, they're increasingly looking to Africa not just as a growth frontier, but as a really complex and dynamic market that needs a lot of contextual understanding. Overlay that with what we've seen from our annual Edelman Trust Barometer that came out this year that revealed a crisis of grievance around the world. And this is largely driven by institutional failures that people see, socioeconomic inequality, a general mistrust in leadership. These global challenges are really deeply felt in Africa as well. And I think this idea of really building back that public trust is more critical than ever for all institutions. So I think with those two factors in play, as Edelman Africa, we really recognize the need for a more nuanced and trust-based advisory support for our clients on the continent. And our response to that in our normal fashion is really just to double down on how we can support our clients and what does that mean for our investment into Africa? What could that look like? So how do we provide the insight, the local knowledge, the strategic communications capabilities that organizations really are going to need to earn that trust and in turn create the impact they're looking for?
That's really interesting context, Karena. So knowing what you know and what we understand from trust and the needs of clients. So what really is Edelman Regional Advisory?
Edelman Regional Advisory, and ERAs for short, which you'll hear a lot through our conversation, is basically Edelman Africa's strategic response to those challenges that we've outlined. So we've really put together a team of the best and most experienced practitioners around the continent to help us really represent both Edelman and their specific region at a strategic and an advisory level for our clients. So this is really about connecting our expertise across Africa, but it's also connecting us with our Edelman global colleagues as well, so to really broaden the network, because we understand that a lot of institutions are coming into Africa. They've either been in Africa and are looking to expand, or they're thinking about Africa as the next growth opportunity. So this is about really making sure that we can provide a very nuanced and a very strategic support and offering for our clients coming onto the continent. In addition to the big network of partners we already have across the continent, the ERAs are specifically focused on how do they provide that sort of advisory support to help navigate our clients' toughest business challenges and turn that into communications opportunities. So working under my leadership, the ERA team really just connects that local expertise with also Edelman's global reach. And as a large global multinational communications consultancy ourselves, we're able to connect ourselves much more broadly across the continent and outside of the continent as well. So this is really making Edelman Africa Africa's most integrated communications advisory offering.
That is so excited, and I think it's such a privilege to be, you have a small part to play in the story that we're going to be telling about the African continent. Now, I would love to open up the discussion to the rest of the floor. Obviously, you're not running this on your own. You are joined by the four regional advisory leads as well. And I would love to get a little bit of context and understanding about how they see, the state of communications on the African continent and the role that being part of the Edelman Regional Advisory would play in terms of, addressing the needs of communications of clients on the continent. And I think a nice place to begin is just the idea of creating really compelling narratives. We are at the end of the day in the business of PR and communication, so narrative is really, really important. And I'd love to get an idea and a sense about the way that African stories are told and how we could potentially be able to impact that. So I'm going to throw this first question out to Kwame. Kwame, do you have any thoughts around how stories about Africa are told and how we could potentially be in a position to change that?
Thank you, Andrei. I think we have to look at it from two perspectives. How Africans tell the stories and how the world tells it. And that's really where the issue is. When you look at most channels covering the continent, they are not African-owned and they are not led by Africans. So they tend to have a overwhelmingly negative coverage of things in Africa, of activities and any other issue. And you sit in South Africa, you can see the coverage between on the US-South Africa relationship. It's when you watch the news, you feel like it is a near catastrophe. And on the other side, you have the Africans who are educated, connected, users of internet, who want to reclaim that narrative and say, you know what, this is not only our story. Our story is not only about disaster and crisis. And more, they demand that brands cannot ignore those trends because they operate on the continent and they have to be very sensitive to that. And we see even that Pan-Africanism or that African identity now being at the forefront of conversation in West, East, and across the continent. So this negative coverage from outside the continent and this reclaiming of African identity creates a situation where we can provide the right advisory as Edelman to brand operating on the continent. And when I say brand operating on the continent, I don't mean only outside brand, because unfortunately, even the brands operating on the continent make the same mistake of building their perspective or their narrative from global coverage on the continent. And so this gap is really where we intervene. And because we are all from all over the continent, no part of the continent is forgotten. We can bring that nuance. And I think narrative is essentially dealing in nuances.
Absolutely. So, Corey, just on the back of what Kwame has just mentioned around, the way that narratives are being framed and the importance of creating our own narratives, can we just double down on the role that we can play as the Edelman Regional Advisory to do that? He specifically made reference to the narratives that are being told about us and then those that we can tell about ourselves.
Sure, happy to. So, I think what Kwame is saying is absolutely right. And that being said, I think we're seeing a lot more people jumping in, a lot more Africans telling their own stories and owning their own narratives. And that's really important in terms of positioning Africa, positioning our specific countries, positioning our stories. So when people see that full and true story of, let's say, for example, a country, I'm from Kenya, for example, it can have such a positive ripple effect when it comes to tourism, when it comes to investment, when it comes to curbing misinformation and disinformation. So a great example that I saw of this in terms of, what people can do is I saw a group of youth living in, I believe, the UK. They decided to travel to Somaliland and shoot their own sort of mini series of what it's like to live and work and experience Somaliland. And it's just showcasing that market from a completely different perspective than what you would see in your typical news or when you switch on the TV, and bringing forth sort of the positive side of the country. And what you saw, they shot this series, they put it on YouTube, and a lot of the comments that we're seeing are so positive, but people saying that they had no idea that this side of Somaliland existed, that they would be willing to visit. So that's really the impact that telling our own stories has. And that's why it's so important for us to be able to do that, both on a personal level when it comes to our personal brands, or, a market level, or even when we're talking about our brands that we're working with as well.
That's incredible. I think I've seen quite a lot of that content as well. And you see it coming up quite a lot about South Africa as well, as you can imagine, on the back of what Kwame was saying around the US-SA relations and the stories that they tell about the African continent. The old tropes of the animals in the background and the hats that we've all grown up hearing and knowing what the truth is. But that those are obviously examples given in more of the maybe tourism space. I'd love to, get a bit more of a sense of, being able to share those narratives on a more specialized basis. Karena, I know that there are specific fields or specific sectors that we're really targeting. So how is it that we can apply that same sort of thinking of our own narratives, but be more specialized in the communications across sectors? I'll also just ask Kwame to join in on the tail end of that.
So, Andrei, I think it's really about, there's a few key areas that we need to look at. So the first is that every sector will have its own language, landscape, and pressure points as well. So whether it's healthcare, energy, tech, agriculture, finance, what resonates in one industry may not meet the mark in another one. So specialized communications really can just ensure that messaging is not only relevant, but also credible within that sector. Then we also think about trust. And as Edelman, we talk about trust a lot, but trust is also very sector specific. In energy, it could be about sustainability commitments and environmental stewardship. In healthcare, for example, it might be more on looking at scientific accuracy, etc. So that, again, this idea of specialized communications can help organizations navigate these nuances with that authenticity. At the same time, we've also got things like policy, regulation, stakeholder expectations will vary from market to market and from region to region. So it's really important to take that into account when we think about how that can actually inform localized narratives. And I think this matters, especially in Africa, where sectors are evolving at different speeds. So, again, when we look at things like agriculture and fintech, they could coexist in the same market, but they need entirely different communication approaches. So this is really where the richness and the diversity of what we're trying to create through eras is really going to be critical for our clients, because we know that we can't just move across borders and assume that everything stays the same. So I think that extra layer of sort of specialization is going to be critical.
That's great. And then Kwame, just on the back of this, I'd love to know your thoughts on applying this to maybe an existing example that you've given where you've had to work and showcase, maybe teach a client, direct a client to tailor their comms, because of the industry that they're in, or maybe because of an opportunity that is arising simply because of the attention that Africa is getting at the moment.
We always constantly do that. And before I move forward, I want to mention insight and data. And Karena is absolutely correct mentioning trust. Most of the time, comms people end up doing information, not communication, because communication is mostly about responding. And we got in trust many insights to respond to the audiences of the brands we work with. And that's the key advantage a brand working with us gets. It's really to have a guideline on what they are saying and to who. For instance, when I look at Nigeria, despite the world being really in a low trust system, trust has been progressing or being stable in Nigeria. So that is an insight that a client who is coming from Europe doesn't necessarily have. So in terms of adapting and localizing communication, I remember a particular case of government engagement in Central Africa where the client wanted to go to media to inform the minister, like, something is going on. And we had to explain that it is not culturally relevant. The influence a media can have in the US would actually be damaging in a place like Central Africa. You have an issue or you want to share a critical issue with a minister, you need to set up a one-to-one meeting where you brief him so that he can then provide you proper feedback and guidance. Another situation is always localizing global campaign. In places like the north of Nigeria, where it may be culturally sensitive to talk about some progressive issue, we have to respect local culture and local legislation. And that is something we always advocate with clients, saying, yes, you have the right of causes. Yes, we understand those causes. But as your communication partner, we have to alert you on the local regulation and the local cultural sensitivity. And that is all what you miss when you operate from a central perspective. And this is what we are trying to do in this team, is to not be centralized and miss, again, like I said initially, those nuances that are really at the heart of communication.
Understanding that nuance also obviously comes from years of experience, and that experience then becomes an expertise that you can then offer. And then I believe, we as the Edelman Regional Advisory are second to none when it comes to that offering. Now, I want to ask, just on the back of that, to Kamal. You're situated in Morocco, and you're representing the north of Africa. And very often, North Africa is maybe coupled with the Middle East and not necessarily with Sub-Saharan Africa. And I'm sure there's even some nuances in terms of expertise with communicating in that realm. So would you just give a little bit of context around the depth of knowledge of and the expertise within the continent, and maybe specifically around the North Africa region?
You triggered me on this question of Middle East, North Africa, or Africa or whatever. And this is the crazy part of our business all the time with the international clients. One of the main things to know about North Africa that it is there are 3 languages spoken in the area. I mean, official and let's say government style official languages. So you have Arabic, French, and English for Egypt. A little bit of mixed in Libya, but the rest of the region is Arabic and French. And so this not only a matter of language, but also of specifics. As Kwame just mentioned, you have sometimes clients come in with a determined way of doing things, and it is obviously counterproductive for them and damaging many of the times. So we need to bring up this expertise, this local expertise, this local insights to guide the clients and to help them navigate how to deal when they need to communicate in Algeria versus communicating in Morocco or in Senegal, which is 3 very tiny markets close to each other, but very different in the approaches. And so this is unfortunately, the unpaid part of the business. I spent my time many years with one line I repeated to many clients and many partners, which is split the line. This is coming from budgets, and they give budgets for each country in Europe and sometimes 2-3 places in the Middle East. And the last line is Africa.
Yeah.
With a line, one line. I tell people, split this line, please. So I think the team at Edelman and the conversation we had over the last 2 and maybe more years, how to tackle this the best way for international clients and even local regional clients is very smart, because at least now we have 4 or 5 regions. And so at least we are trying to split the line into 4 or 5 regions and having local insight, local experts coming together to counsel the clients, whether it is a global campaign trying to put it into Africa, or this is let's say a big client from Nigeria, Morocco, or South Africa, or Egypt trying to go outbound into Africa. So still they need expertise, still they need insight from these experts and say, listen, you can do this as an Egyptian company. You can tell this, but not that in Morocco. Mm-hmm. And the same goes into Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, South Africa, Ethiopia, etc. And I think this era, Edelman Regional Advisors approach, I think is very interesting. If I am a CMO, CCO, international one, where I have the A either in CEMEA or EMEA or MEA or whatever, where the A is, I think it is a good way to approach the region. So expertise, I think we have a very, very talented team around from each part of the Edelman network in Africa. Very, very, very talented people. But also we have the power to raise, let's say, concerns to these international clients. And I think through our experiences has been very, very, let's say, productive and efficient to very high-level clients that we have through the years. And I think this is very fantastic that we had to share with the team.
Yeah. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I just speaking from my own experience as somebody who, sometimes comes across briefs from other parts of the world about Africa, and they paint us all with a single brush. And the unfortunate thing is sometimes they come onto the continent with a specific idea of how things should be. And they might cluster things in, with some kind of sense, maybe Francophone together, Arabic together, English together, but very often you find that we get bucketed into one big country when those nuances are really, really important to land the effectiveness of our communications. And very often the data isn't there. So just tying it back to what Kwame was saying, to what Karena is saying, and what you're saying, having these advisors who know this localized expertise and can give recommendations that speak to, where the overlaps do exist and where you can find those efficiencies. And then also to your point, splitting the line, so that you're clicking a little bit and thinking a bit further, and being able to give a bit more insight. I think that's a wonderful opportunity for us to be able to offer, clients around the world. And now just adding to that, just speaking about this local expertise, and Geraldine, you are fielding briefs and opportunities from all over the continent. And I'm sure even you are also having to understand how, having these local experts is important. What is your thought around why, having more of this local expertise matters in solving these global problems, especially for those who are trying to bring business into Africa?
No, thanks for that, Andrei. I think just to kick off, probably the one most important thing, I think, particularly when it comes to global brand, is just ensuring that global brands understand that sort of that brand equity doesn't translate across borders, right? Your brand strategy in one market does not necessarily, is not necessarily going to capture the audience that you want in another market. So I think when global brands are coming onto the continent and sort of the expertise that we're coming and giving, it's, something that my colleagues have quite echoed throughout this conversation in terms of just that cultural nuance, being able to come in as the ears with that cultural intelligence and even political awareness, right? Because we do understand, especially if you look at the African continent, how there's quite an intertwined relationship between your economics or economy together with sort of like the political space. So it's coming in with that knowledge and that expertise of understanding the lay of the land in all these markets that we are in Africa. To say, if you're now coming in as a brand, you want to launch your product or you want to grow your product on this continent, how do you navigate all of those nuances? So not only from a cultural perspective, but again, like I was saying, even the political awareness. Kwame earlier on was talking about how, certain client wanted to engage with a minister. So yes, overseas, you could very well write an open letter. You could very well, go on a publicity tour. But in Africa, then it's a completely different story because of, I think, if you also even look at the history of how, sort of our governments, sort of also came to be, if you look back even to monarchies and sort of like that lineage. So there's all of that context that goes back to hundreds of years that shape us as who we are, as a continent, and even the different countries that we're in. So I think that's something that we try and emphasize, especially as years, or even as we're going out there looking for new business and just engaging clients, helping them to understand how they can engage with their target audience on the continent. Andrei?
I also think it's just to add to that, it's also just knowing that just because a brand or a client has an equity or proposition in one place, it doesn't mean that they can't enter with a strapline or a communications platform in another. It's about knowing how to do so, right? And having the right partner who can come in and say, yes, you've got this really, really strong proposition and really strong message, but you cannot say it that way, Yeah. And only we with this local expertise would be able to guide you and say, this is how you land that exact same message. So if you want to have a global message that resonates the same everywhere, knowing how to get it to resonate is something Absolutely. That we can definitely be able to add. And I mean, this is all about being able to provide solutions for our clients, being able to provide solutions for real African challenges as well. And I think just from there, I'd like to open this next section up to the floor, just beginning about the sort of solutions-oriented nature of being an African, and just how we as Africa are a source of practical and scalable solutions. So I'm going to start with Karena, just some thoughts that you've got around that.
Sure. I think, look, largely a mindset. It's a mindset thing, right? So, and I'm pretty sure at least one person in this conversation is going to mention this, but look at the things that we've really revolutionized in categories like M-Pesa. Absolutely. I mean, that revolutionized financial inclusion, renewable energy innovations, agri-tech platforms that are now connecting farmers directly to markets. Like, Africa really does have a track record of consistently pioneering these sort of practical, scalable solutions that are actually addressing real world challenges. And I think very often we don't get the credit for that. It's seen as just that we're just a market for those solutions, not that we're actually a generator of them. So I think, again, that comes back to sort of shifting the narrative. And I think it's a really powerful reminder that some of the most effective ideas are actually born from necessity, from creativity, and from resilience. And where better do those skill sets reside than in Africa? And that's where I really believe we're leading the charge.
I'm sure, Kwame, just going to throw it to you. You're leading 2 of the 5 regions with both Central and West Africa. Of course, the biggest market in that region is Nigeria, which itself is also a burgeoning innovation hub. And I would love to, just get a little bit of a sense of the solutions that are coming from that part of the world that the rest of the world can look forward to being part of.
There are countless stories about Nigeria and yes, in the tech sector, I mean, Lagos, sorry to Kenya, but Lagos is the place to be with the unicorns. We got the first African unicorn out of Nigeria. We got the second, and so on and so forth. There are so many now that I've stopped counting. And they come up with innovative solution. For instance, Piggy Vest has been doing a fantastic work in Nigeria, helping people to save money. And in a country where there are economic challenges, you can imagine that saving money is critical, and that has become a momentum. And so many fintech are also connecting sellers and traders to their clients, and the delivery food space. Local brands in the delivery space have been able to fight successfully global brands and have a lot of success. Chodek is one of the examples. But when everybody think about Nigeria, they think about the Africa biggest export, which is culture. And you think of Nollywood, Afrobeat taking over the world. I read yesterday that the deal between Sony Music and Mavins was valued at $200 million. That's a music label started in Lagos with Nigerian artists that made it to private equity and acquisition. So there's so many positive narratives. But again, what defines this region is that people are resilient. And I want to talk about the resilience that we don't credit our people for, because Africa has been hit with so many things over time that I think it is important to mention that when you look at how DRC has been going from crisis to crisis, to be able to stand as I always remind people that it is the only African country with 2 time zones. It is that large. It is the fastest growing population. And it got more than the mind people and an economy that is growing, and that people, the news and the narratives always overlook from a client perspective. The telecommunication operators are not able to cover the market. So it's very interesting. Now, when you look at our global client, they always try to crack Francophone Africa. And that's the story of my life and my career. It's all about Francophone Africa. We see that businesses are now coming from everywhere, whether it is Asia, Turkey, and they do not speak French, but they definitely want to do business. We have a client at Edelman that is opening hotel in Francophone countries, and they speak English, but they want to talk to French people. And that is how ERA play differently, because then we can advise them properly in English while connecting with their audiences on the in the local news or in the market.
I feel like I always want to go to Nigeria first because of just how big they are, and you make such a good point about how we are actually cultural exporters, not necessarily first and foremost, but increasingly so. It's the same for Kenya, and it's the same for South Africa. And it's the same for North Africa as well. So to think of just solutions that are coming only in tech or in fintech or healthcare, kind of loses the essence of how we communicate, and how the way that we communicate is also has a potential to change the world. I know there's a lot of excitement now with the Club World Cup, and then next year there's also going to be the World Cup. And in a few years' time, you've got the 2030 World Cup that's also going to be reaching reaching Morocco for the first time. A lot of brands are going to have a lot of interest in Africa. A lot of brands are going to have a lot of interest in what is happening in your country. So, just speak about, some of the solutions that, communications or, what Morocco can offer the world now that everybody's eyes are going to be on Morocco in a few years' time.
Well, let me start first that next week we have the WAFCON, Women African Cup
That's
of
right.
Nations.
Correct.
So this is the first one of a series. Like we have at least one World or African Cup in football, women and men, from now until 2030, where it finishes with the FIFA World Cup. The market is burgeoning right now with many ideas, many crazy times for everybody. The infrastructure that Morocco is putting together is a very, very incredible in terms of magnitude that we are living. We are almost putting together a 1 GDP as a budget for infrastructure for the coming years. So we exceeded, I think, in terms of the investments, the direct investment that is that we are told about is more than $150 billion only in infrastructure. So this is a crazy moment right now. And and so we have businesses that are running 24 hours, 7 days a week right now to prepare the infrastructures around transport, logistics, and of course, all the logistics around football. It means like stadiums and all hotels and stuff like that. So we're going to see in end of this year the AFCON with many firsts in terms of the history of African football Cup of Nations, in terms of infrastructure ready for each team. So there are many, many firsts. I can tell you, this is the first time for the Africa Cup of Nations that you will have, each team will have its own hotel and its own stadium for training. It has never been the case in the history of the football tournaments in Africa. So it is a huge commitment from the country. And I think it's very well received by all the football family around Africa. And we have seen comments all over the continent around it. And yes, and if I can link that to what Karena and Kwame just said about resilience, I think this is a big sign of resilience. And also, I think of another term, which is high agency. So I think Africans has always shown and lived and are living high agency on every aspect of their lives. The life has been for many years painted as the most challenging life for humans. I don't think so. I have never bought that. If you can see right now what is the media covering around the biggest cities that we have seen before, like now you have warnings. If you go to London, please keep your phone in your pocket. Don't show a watch. If you go to Paris, please don't leave anything on the table. Put it in your pockets if you have a drink or something like that. And even in the US. So this is the reality that we are living. And unfortunately, a lot of Africans that don't travel don't know. And that's why we believe what we see, which is, as everyone was saying before, what we see in the media is overlooking the reality for sure. And the unfortunate thing is that many Africans believe that. And when you talk to people, you see how great the work they are doing, how efficient they are doing. Sometimes I am sure this is the experience of everyone here. You have a brief from international clients, and when you come up with the results, they are just stunned because they cannot achieve those kind of results anywhere. And also the approach. And yeah, so I think high agency that we are living on a daily basis here, from the top of an agency to the last person, from the journalist, from the head of a media to an influencer, to I think this is a very different kind of marketplace, and differentiated, of course, from place to place inside Africa.
Yeah, it's a good time to be African, and it's a good time to be an African in the communication space as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. I definitely believe in that.
Yeah, having the history that we've had, the tenacity, the resilience, the high agency, as you've mentioned, and applying it to huge scale productions like the World Cup. Very, very exciting time. And I think it just goes to show how, with so much opportunity, there's more room for cross-continental collaboration. And I think this is going to be the closing segment. And this is going to be for Geraldine and Corey, just to have some reflections on like what's the secret sauce about what makes collaboration in Africa so powerful and unique. I'm going to start with Corey, just giving a little bit of thought around that.
When you come to a continent like Africa, where we're so large, we have so many different cultures, over 50 countries, and all of them very unique. If you think about even East Africa on its own, a campaign that, for example, that you would launch in Kenya, you wouldn't take and launch the exact same campaign in Uganda and Tanzania. There's still so many nuances, even though we're so close together, and we have sort of that East African connectedness. I think that's what makes it so unique in terms of communicating in such a large continent with so many different cultures. There's so many languages to take into account. There's so many different cultural nuances to take into account. At the same time, there's also that element of trying to bring that all together when we're doing campaigns that are, continental. So it's challenging, it's fun, it's interesting, because it's that great mix of trying to find out what brings us together, and they are those elements, but also what makes each market unique and how to use that in terms of how we're communicating.
And Geraldine, I'm sure you've also got something to add there about your own experience about what makes us so powerful and so unique.
I think for me, so just to touch on businesses first, I think the businesses that are going to win, the businesses that we're going to help win on the continent are businesses that are here to solve, are businesses that are going to recognize that they're on the African continent, are businesses that are going to recognize that Africans have got their own aspirations. We've got the youngest population in the world. Businesses that are coming to offer solutions. I know Karena talked about M-Pesa earlier. There's so many examples we could touch on. There's a Mukuru, for example, that I would like to share before we close, wherein there's been such a huge gap when it comes to the unbanked, right? And these businesses come and said, look, how can we make people's lives better? How do we make financial transactions better for those unbanked? The remittances, so many Africans across the entire world, how do we get them to send money back home? How do we help with grocery shopping and all of those? So they looked at the problems and they came with a solution. So they've come to solve, and they've done amazingly well. Super huge fintech that's doing absolutely amazing. And we're coming in there's an Edelman and saying, we are here across the continent. We will help you translate your solution to the population so that they understand what it is that you're here to solve, so that we're able to communicate on their behalf and how their target audience is going to resonate. So we're here to work with businesses that want to win, Andrei.
Oh, absolutely. Of course. That's a really nice place to end off. And I just think I want to thank everybody for being here and joining in on this conversation, sharing incredible insights about what the opportunity is on the African continent and how the Edelman Regional Advisory is really the perfect partner to help bring your communications objectives to life, understanding the nuances that come with communicating in different parts of the continent, and really being able to drive impact and change and trust, of course. We are Edelman after all, with the power of this esteemed panel of experts. And just to close off, I will just challenge all of you guys to follow the journey. We are posting on all of our social media, so please do follow not only Edelman Africa on LinkedIn and Instagram and X, but also follow our partners, follow THOP, follow Stratius Group, as well as any one of the rest of us on our LinkedIn as well. And of course, just continue to learn more on africa.edelman.com. We're really interested to find out more about what your challenges are and how we're able to solve those for you. Thank you so much. This has been a great conversation.